As I was saying a little while ago, unfortunately, Mr. Bowden is at a extended family member's funeral. He cannot be here, so we'll have Aaron Phillips, Executive Director of Elementary Education and former Rotary Principal. The floor is yours.
So, these lovely ladies behind me have put together, you guys have heard about the Oswego County Literacy Initiative, or OCLI for short. So they are going to be putting theory into practice with some videos up here, and the floor is yours. So this is Simone Pone. Well, before we do that, can we have, because I see some other peeps back there, Brewerton teachers who are here, can you please stand and be recognized? So back there we have Callie Lindbergh, who might not be able to get up. Allison Weeks is next to her. Tracy Karzik is on the end. Kelly Schluter is in the corners. Candace Kozlowskis is slouching in her chair. Jessica Lynn is going to be one of the presenters. She's right?
Yeah.
Yes. Allie Gradis is between us and, Brewerton and Millard Hawk. Kayla Rout, Simone Pone, those are reading teachers. And then we've got Rachel Burns, who is already recognized once tonight. So without further ado, come on up.
I guess I'll hold it. Good evening, Board of Ed members and community. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to get started on our spotlight on Brewerton. We'll start with one of my favorite quotes. Excellence is achieved by the mastery of fundamentals. So we all know football coach Vince Lombardi, very successful in a very short amount of time that he was given on our earth. His secret was simply the basics. Every practice started with just the basics. Tackling, blocking, handling the ball. Very basic elements. This was done to such an extent that it almost became muscle memory. Players were doing it quickly without even thinking. That is exactly our goal when it comes to teaching phonics. When students master phonics and the basic decoding skills that are a part of it, their brains are free to focus on comprehension. To be effective, phonics instruction must be explicitly taught in a systematic way, and this requires a lot of repetition and practice. Basic rules must be taught. Practices must be mastered so students can quickly and accurately identify the words. This again lets the brain work towards comprehension. In essence, letter-sound correspondences are the equivalent of "Gentlemen, this is a football," which are the words that Vince Lombardi started every practice with. Very basic. The repetition, the practice, and the fundamentals of decoding are necessary elements of effective reading instruction. Overlearning the basics is optimal because it reduces that heavy load on the brain. The energy that is saved is then used by the brain to focus on the comprehension. So we like to say that comprehension is the Super Bowl of reading. Hard at work. So quickly, in my video you will see explicit phonics instruction. Explicit instruction is scientifically proven and research-based. Explicit phonics builds from a part to a whole. It begins with the instruction of letters and then the sound association of that letter. From there, it builds on to syllabication and then blending sounds into the words. Explicit phonics instruction is the most effective approach for all students. Many students can learn without this type of instruction. However, it's not only the at-risk students. Those who might be average or below average benefit greatly. And you'll see later on, we talk about the Swiss cheese effect. Sometimes students have holes or gaps in their phonics acquisition. We work hard through explicit instruction to close that gap. Most types of phonics instruction can be beneficial for students. but it has been conclusively studied that explicit phonics is the way to go. This not only allows students to propel ahead in reading, but it also ensures their success for a solid foundation for their academic future. So here I'm teaching letters with their sound association, and then I'll move into an activity called Say It, Move It, where they'll be building what we call CVC words, consonant, vowel, consonant. You'll notice my chips are color coordinated. They stay the same color, so students can build upon this explicit instruction and internalize what they're being taught.
Letter name and letter sound. Okay, so we'll say the name of the letter first, and then the letter sound. Are you ready? We love the way you put that sound. Excellent job. Very good. Okay, let's try to take that letter E. That sound. Listen to me first, okay? E. Okay, play the E again. From the left now. And then understand the sound of E. You cannot pop the air coming out. You have to stop that really quickly. Okay, let's try it again. Give me a close now. Good. Let's leave all that up. So let's leave our sound. Flip it really quickly. You ready? We want to leave all the sound up. So we very quickly say our sound. Very good. All right, now I'd like you to take your right words here. Address, chips, going to build some sounds that have the short E. Short E. Sound short E. I would like you to use your chips to make the first word.
We should just get a set of speakers and have them on deck.
Very good. Go ahead and take your line. All right, teachers ready? I'd like you to make the next word. Please state the word pen. 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 Can you read quickly? Pen. Pen. Good job. That means you move your consonant, your rest of your vowel, and you move your consonant. Read all these words. C, E, C.
Okay, so as you can see, it's very slow, it's pointed. We're teaching them to do what we call clipping that sound. So we get rid of what we call the schwa sound, which is a. It's very pointed. The kids are moving slowly, but this only alludes back to the whole fundamental process. We have to have the basics solid. So we move slower to go faster eventually.
The next two videos you're going to see are all about phonological awareness. So phonological awareness is all done orally, and there's no print that goes with it. It's all about hearing the syllables, onset rhymes, and manipulating sounds and words. There are 26 letters in our alphabet, but there are 44 phonemes in our English language. And about 60 to 70% of children develop phoneme awareness without being taught, but other children won't develop those skills unless they have direct instruction. Poor phonological awareness is the most common cause of poor readers. I'm going to read a quote from David Kilpatrick. Reading comprehension is our goal, and the most direct route to good reading comprehension is to make the word recognition process automatic so the student can focus all of his or her mental energy on the meaning and not sounding out the words. Phonological awareness develops in different stages, so Kayla and I are going to highlight two different levels of phonemic awareness. The first video will show a group of first graders, and they're going to delete the initial sounds. They are a group that is having trouble with those CBC words, so we're going back to the basics to strengthen that first. So we only did one student per individual. We usually start first with doing it together so they get the practice, and then we check in with each student to make sure they're getting what they need to be doing for this level. My video is similar, but my video is with a group of 5th grade students, and they're working on advanced phoneme level deletion, so it's a harder skill for them to be able to do.
Today we're going to do undefinitely sound words. And how we're going to do this is I'm going to use these chips. And each chip is going to represent a sound in the word. And I will flip the chip to show you what sound to change. Okay? Say, act,
I used the chips in the video to show them where the sounds were in the words. And at the end, they get a grade on the level, but I let them choose if they think they can do it without the chips or if they think they need the chips to help them. And so they all chose to do it without the chips, but then the one student struggled with it, so I took the chips out to show him where the sound was that he needed to be deleting.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Lynn. I'm a fourth grade teacher at Riverton. As you can see in Kayla, Simone, and Allison's videos, they're actually pulling students out during an AIS block, where my video is in my classroom. So we're also working with students during this AIS block, pulling small groups to work on other skills and filling those gaps that Simone was talking about. Before this video, I gave my class a phonics screener. It's actually a spelling screener, so it's going to look a little bit different than their videos. They're going above and they're breaking apart the words by the sound and then actually spelling the word, because that's a skill that they needed to work on, continue to work on. I did use chocolate, which is always a good motivation piece. The coffee is not mine, so bear with me. Okay. So first I'm saying that I'm giving them the same word that they're breaking apart by sound with the chocolate pieces. They have to decide how many chocolate pieces or how many sound phonemes are in the word. That they're being taped, so first they weren't saying it, and then I asked them to repeat the sounds. Thank you.
Okay, so chocolate was really motivating. So yeah, as you can see, it's pretty complex. Takes a lot of planning, but what's super about that really is that we really get to know the students closely, and we can differentiate the instruction to meet all of our students' needs. So as we continue, we're almost finished. So basically, students who do not receive systematic explicit instruction, they do take longer to become fluent readers. They are vulnerable to reading failure, especially if they're not reading independently those texts and they're not, by mid-first grade, reading those grade level texts. They're not reaching optimal levels of reading proficiency. They're left to guess from words from context, or they're guessing at a word or learning a word just from the shape of it. And they're more likely to struggle with content words encountered in grades 3 through 12. Because they have that Swiss cheese, some of them, they're not able to attend to the content. So that is the point of our instruction. We want them to be able to be decoding and reading fluently so that they're able to attend to the meaning of the text that they've been given. So we're not born with the ability to read. It's a mix of a lot of connections made throughout our brain. We've got vision, hearing, cognition, language. So when these systems are well developed, and the child learns the symbols of our language, as in the letters, and they learn the sounds, which we heard Jess alluding to, called phonemes, they make those connections readily available for those kids that have that. So although many students struggle, or may not struggle, just exposing students to print is really not enough. We have to give them more. So they need to be explicitly taught the letters of the alphabet, the sounds that they represent, and how to combine those sounds to make words, to make sentences, and to connect to text. Students who do not receive this type of instruction, they develop those gaps or holes, that Swiss cheese we're talking about. They spend so much energy decoding that their ability to attend comprehension is compromised, and they are not likely to feel confident in attacking unfamiliar words, especially as they move up the chain, we call it, and get into what we call multisyllabic words like extraterrestrial. You know, big words like that. If they do not know how to chunk that apart, it'll be very hard for them to comprehend. Sometimes the content or the context clues that we hear about don't necessarily match what's going on. And they are more likely to think that reading is hard. So that's not what we want for our students. Are there any questions?
I have more of a comment. Is you hit the nail on the head, Simone, where it is very complex. So people that don't know education, they think it's easy to come in to teach, especially at the elementary level, where it's not. You're all practitioners. I love going into the rooms and seeing just the high level of decoding strategies, phonemic awareness. But I've had parents frequently come up to me and say, Tom, I got to share this. My kid's parent conference, wow, how detailed it was that I'm hearing is specifically what my student struggles with, my child struggles with, that at home we can practice this. So I truly feel that our teachers know students right now, their strengths, their weaknesses like never before. And that's, again, that's a testament to all that you guys do, and that's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
I have a question. We saw a presentation, I think it was by Cole or Hastings, where there were different classes of, like third grade has reading all at the same time, and so your classroom might be working on a specific skill, another one, and then whatever skill that student's struggling with, they push in. Is that accurate? Or is that happening in Brewerton as well?
Some teachers are pushing in. We do have in kindergarten, first grade, a program in all of the buildings. It's either called Team Time or SAIL.
I think that's
Yes, and we have different bodies in. We have the reading teacher, a teaching assistant, a classroom teacher. Sometimes we have another teaching assistant if we're lucky. If not, then it would be a computer-based type of instruction. But we are in seeing groups based on their skills, and we're giving them the instruction that they need. For students that might have some difficulty attending, paying attention, we do pull some of those students out, and we found a lot of success with teaching them outside of the classroom with less distraction, and that's where we can really see the growth happen. So we do move in and out, and I love to call AIS a revolving door. You are not in here for life, if I can help it. And all of our teachers in all of our buildings feel that way. So we are constantly looking at data. We're changing kids. We're changing providers with kids. Sometimes some of us do not click with a certain personality. So we're constantly fluxing in and out to do what's best for the instruction. Good. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to introduce King and King, Turner Construction. They can come on up for the presentation. Good evening.
I'm going to let Pat start with an update on the construction work, and then I'll give you an update on the security project.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to update you really where we are with the current project. Miller Mock, we're kind of a little ahead of schedule with the area that we picked up over the Christmas break with those 4 additional classrooms. So the terrazzo floor is in, and over the next break, we're going to look to maybe grab another area hallway. So that's moving right along nicely. The auditorium, the majority of the steel is done. The framing is going in, everything's taking nice shape. We're currently tracking to be back on schedule with that as we speak now. So everything's looking well there. We're ready for the summer push here. The roof is going to be completed on this building. That'll finish up the roof project, which was phase 1. Technology is just finishing up with a few additional pieces of hardware, and once we get everything moved over and buttoned up, we'll finish
I just want to reiterate, so it's on the record again, because there's been a lot of rumors, you know, I'm sure you guys are used to this. I got no less than 3 different people in the last couple weeks saying, oh, you should really ask about the auditorium, because we're hearing it's not on track, not on, right? So
Trust
at
and
this
verify.
point, yeah, at this point, everything's good, you're on track, no major concerns from here.
Steel was a bit of a challenge, but we got through that, and things are working to get back on track.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So the security project, if you recall, last time I did a presentation, we were looking at having approval in March so that we could bid in the March-April timeframe. Last week, we received our final mechanical comments from the expedited review process, so we answered those. Now it goes back to SED for the final approval, which will take a week or two, and then we'll be ready to go out. So it's fitting right in the timeframe that we expected, which is great. So we'll be bidding sometime probably towards the 3rd or 4th week of this month, and it'll be out on the street, and then we'll accept bids in April, and then we'll go from there. So right now, there's nothing new to report on that front other than where we last budget, unless somebody has any questions.
So the only question I would have, all things point back to, you know, COVID-19. So I know Ms. Coldwell was going to give an update in the superintendent's report, but do you know yet if some of the things that are being talked about at state level as far as mandated windows are shutting down, does that stop construction as well? Do we know that at this point?
No, we don't. There's a lot of rumors going around about what may or may not happen, so we can only react to what we know reality is. So there really is no reason to think, and there's been no precedent of construction shutting down. There may be different office shutdowns, which may slow down the review process. I don't see that happening either. But we'll just have to keep an eye on things. But right now, there's no indication that things are going to shut down to that extent anytime soon.
Yeah, so for the board in particular, later we are, the 2 change orders that are in. So if anyone has questions on those now, we'll take advantage of them while they're there. And that way Paul also doesn't have to wait around to the end of the meening for.
And I'll just mention the other thing that you're acting on tonight is the seeker for the capital outlay project, which there's not really much more detail than that's the procedural thing that we go through every year to put that into the budget as a line item, and it's a continuance of access hardware and cameras now for the middle school, which was part of the capital outlay this year at the high school.
No questions on that?
That's easy.
Yeah. Nice weather.
Give Chris a lot of questions.
Nice.
We're good?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. And now we'll introduce Mr. Chris Todd, District Superintendent for Oswego County City BOE.
Hi folks, want to congratulate the elementary teachers for explaining what they explained to you, because like Tom said, teaching reading is rocket science, and people think it's not, and you saw a snippet of the fact that it is, and nothing gets me more jazzed than phonemic awareness, diphthongs and digraphs and all that stuff. But we're not here to talk about that, we're here to go over the admin budget. I'll take any questions, and then if there's been any building questions on any other things state ed, budget, or BOCES related, I'm here. So I'll get moving. Admin budget is the one portion of the budget that's not your program budget, but it's part of the budget that you vote on. So actually at BOCES we have 156 active general and federal fund coasters. So every single one of those budgets is independent of every other one. And the reason we do that on the program side is because not every district subscribes to every single thing that's offered at BOCES. So that's why they're all completely separate. So what's in our budget is, the admin budget is expenses for the Board of Ed, expenses for my office, the Human Resource Office, Administrative Services, the Business Office, debt service, if applicable, and if we have to take out a revenue anticipation note, that's where that would be. Retiree health, you've heard me talk about that ad nauseum, and I will again tonight. The reality of it is that a majority of our costs all are sort of in that space of retiree health. And then there's the shared operational overhead, that's transfer charges. That's like our portion of lights, heat, cleaning supplies. That doesn't all come out of programming, we get our little share. So you look at all of that, but really the total FTEs, and FTE is a full-time equivalent, that's like a person. So like whenever I say one FTE, I'm talking about the equivalent of one whole person. And the reason that there's partial people down there, the 13, the 0.53, is because y'all know Mike Shepard. Mike Shepard, he might be in this budget at 0.8, and then he might be in the adult ed budget, which is a completely separate budget, at 0.2, or 0.15, and then maybe some portion of him lies in other budgets. As it does with our support staff, because we have support staff that work across many, many different areas, and if they do work in adult ed, or if they're doing work outside of the admin function, we make sure that that's where their portion of their salary is budgeted. So our WADA, how we figure out your rate. So the rate is figured out by our budget number, minus other revenue, which really isn't a lot. You'll see in here, it floats around $77,000, $78,000. Back in the day, when we could actually put money in the bank and collect on the interest of that money, that was the other revenue, and now that's just non-existent. You know what the interest rates are doing. So our WADA is the weighted average daily attendance. So basically, our WADA is every kid in the county, and they're counted on a daily basis, and that's a number that we get from Albany. And what you may see when we get to a subsequent slide is you may see the population of your district. You may say, actually, we have less kids than that right now. Well, it's because these are the audited numbers from like a year and a half, 2 years ago. So sometimes you will see that the number of students that we're calculating for our WADA in 2 years will be the actual numbers from this year, because everything is in an audited form and not in projected or real time. So we often talk about our WADA because basically it's how many kids you have. And as you can see, from 2016 to 2020-21, all 9 districts, everybody's our WADA, number of kids that we're counting, is going down. I'm going to show you a subsequent slide that shows you how far we have fallen countywide. And it's important because what that does is that takes the divisor and drives up some of the costs, just not because maybe costs are going up, but as the number of units go down, that dollar amount that's needed to generate that same thing goes up. So as you can see, 16, 17, you had 4,097, and now we're down about 275. All right? Now, it's starting to sort of bottom out in some places and level off, but we are seeing fluctuations in some communities. This is the big one. So, back in 2000, 2001, we had 27,000 kids in the county. And now, right now, we have 19,330. And you remember how I told you, like, that's the number now? That's probably not the real number. It's not the real number. We're down probably just shy of 19,000. I think we're in the 18,000s if we take actual numbers of kids. So it's not just your district. So sometimes we often say, well, we've lost so many kids. Everybody's losing kids. And it's because people aren't having 7 kids anymore. And there's a lot of people that are moving out of New York. That's just the reality of our situation. So influences to the admin expenses, retiree health offset, which is something that we've been using for the last 2 years. So we've been sharing a small amount of the cost for the health insurance out of some of the program budgets. And we did that based on the fact that some of our program budgets are cross contracts, right? So we actually have a lot of cross contracts. And we generate revenue from people that aren't one of our components through the cross contracts. And the only way for us to kind of pull some dollars from our non-component districts and have that help offset some of the costs of retiree health is to pull out is to pull out an amount from those coasters. It's about $188,000. It's increased by 10 grand. I'm actually thinking that we probably won't use it. In fact, last year we didn't use it. We used it as an offset, and then it was returned to everybody in their refund. But that number gave us a comfortable space because we've had a pretty good health year. And the reason I say that is because we're self-insured. So we're self-insured, which means we pay premiums like everybody else, but at the end of the year, all of the money that doesn't get expended goes back to U.S. components and to all of those non-components who subscribe to our services that end up with a bit of a refund based on a good health year. So as you can see in our draft budget, salaries are at the top, and I want to highlight that because people are looking at that saying, boy, it's 6.5%. That's high. It is. And the reason it is because we have 2 or 3 civil service titles that we were having people work right on the cusp of what their civil service title was, but we know we needed more. So they took the civil service title, they got a bump in pay. So we had that happen in a couple of places. And then the other thing that we did is we reassigned back to the admin budget those positions that were doing more of the admin work than they were in the other coaster work. That also was inclusive of my raise, and I don't hide it. My salary was capped for forever, and last year the cap came off, and my raise is in there, and then I will be capped again at the end of next year. As you can see, equipment's pretty small amount, supplies are pretty small, contractual is contractual, debt service and benefits are down slightly, but the retiree health, in past years, that's the yellow one that's going up $70,000. In past years, that was the one that blew everybody's mind. Like that was the one that people would say, how can your retiree health be going up that much? And the reason for it is, if I have between 15 and 20 retirements every year on a program, they go into this budget line, and they don't come out. You know, they come out eventually at the end, but most of our what we were dealing with wasn't that our rate was going up like crazy, because our rate has been pretty steady, somewhere between 4 and 7, sometimes 8%, because we've had good healthcare business, and we haven't had to use our stop loss insurance on our policies, which has been very useful. Because the more you use stop loss insurance on your policies, what happens to your stop loss insurance? Your premium on your stop loss goes up. So we've had some good years. But really, this is a reflection of us having an exceptional year last year with our health service, our health insurance. So I say that knowing that at the bottom, the magic number that everybody wants to see is the 1.9. So our admin budget in its entirety is going up 1.9. And it's fun to come on a good year and tell you that. But it also sets me up for massive failure next year if I have a bad health, right? So I'll be coming in next year hoping that I give you the same news at 1.9, but we also know that that can climb as high as 3, 4, 5. We try to keep it down. But I'd like to pretend it's something I did. That's just the circumstances in which being self-insured and having exceptionally low rates occasionally will put us into a place where we're coming out at under 2% with an increase on the admin budget. And I say that because it's unrealistic to expect both component districts and even the BOCES to always have sort of that hard line of 1.9 when we know what's happening to healthcare costs. We also are doing some things that are helping us. You're not seeing it in this number because retiree health is pretty much standard, but we have worked it with our bargaining units, and we have an increase in their portion of the premium, and we have made massive strides in pharmaceuticals. 3-tier drug plans, using Canada, our neighbor to the north, for mail-in. We've saved hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So estimated revenues, I talked about like those other revenues. You can see interest earnings estimated about $1,000, maybe, right? Because it's just that's what that is. And then other revenues our indirect billing from grants. So we score a couple of grants, whether they're distance learning grants or they're other grants. We make sure that the administrative pushing the paper is built into that grant, so we make sure that we are getting some money off of that. We do have an ERS reserve fund that we keep basically, it's not a lot of money in our reserve fund, but what we do with it every year is we make sure that if we see increases in ERS, we're gonna pull from that reserve fund to flatten things out. And then there's miscellaneous auctions and those types of things, which usually garners like $1,000, because everything we're auctioning is at the end of life, like its usefulness. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, in years past, and I'll go back 10 years, interest earnings used to be a big deal. So we used to take out a revenue anticipation note at a lower interest rate, and then we would invest that money over a short 6-month return, and then pay off the RAM, and then not pocket, but put the rest of the money into the coffers. And you just don't do that anymore because the game is not played like that, and interest rates just aren't working for us. So total budget, so what that 1.9% increase is representative of, it's representative of $150,000. Of that, retiree health is 70. With the back out of 10,000, we're going to take 10,000 out of programs, which are mostly our cross-contract programs, to get that down to 60, and all other parts are 89.9. So rarely, if ever, not in my lifetime, not in the 8 years I've been here, has retiree health been, their portion of this budget been that much lower or lower at all than the rest of the budget. So we are having sort of an anomaly here. So the $399.23, that's your actual Arwada number. That's the number that's generated. That's for the billable units. You know, of the increase to that, if there's a $3.59 increase, that's because of the health insurance. There's a $6.70 increase. That's on the Arwada. That's because we have less units. So that has to go up in order to pay it. It's almost as if, so I live in Constantia, and let's say the value of my house goes from what it is down, right? And everybody in Constantia's value of their house goes down. In order for you to raise the same amount of revenue, you have to raise the tax rate. That's what that 6.7, that's what's happening there, because we have less units to multiply by. So basically, all they're projected is $4.06. So the new rate for this year is $413.58. It's a difference of 3.6% based on that formula, but the overall budget is 1.9. So this is specific to you. In 2018-19, your contractual expense, that's what you spent on BOCES programs. So not BOCES programs, admin. Then you received, and I know you're going to have questions about the surplus, and I'm looking forward to those. You received $145,000 back from surplus. Your BOCES aid that was generated on the money that you expended was $892,526. So your net cost, even though you had to deal out that much money that year, the next year you got back the equivalent of that over $1 million. So your net cost for that year was $412,363. And then you see the middle year is skipped because that's our year now. And we know what your contractual expense is, but we don't know if you're going to fully be obligated to that. Because if there are students in there that are in program, whether they're in day treatment, or they could be in central ed, or they could be in a lot of different places. If they move to APW, they're not your student anymore. So you wouldn't be billed on a special needs student in day treatment if they're no longer yours. So that's an assumed number. And after it's audited, then you'll get the numbers like you got up for 18-19. So as we look down at 2021, as we're projecting out, that's an assumed number. So as we look to say that in 2021, you're projecting next year to spend $1,597,246, we're assuming that based on your initial request. Final requests come out later on in the year, but this is just an illustration so that you can see. As is the surplus refund, because you're like, Chris, how do you know what you're going to refund us the following year? I don't. That's on a 10-year average of the percentage of refund that you've been receiving in the past. So Mike just does his magic. And I'd like to apologize for Mike not being here. I know you'd much rather see him, but he was in Albany today working, doing the people's work. And I said to him, depending on when you get done, don't rush back. So he got done late, so he wasn't able to join us tonight. So same thing assumed. So it's an assumed refund. That's pretty much not an assumed BOCES aid, even though there might be small fluctuations in BOCES aid from year to year. That would be a pretty solid number. So as you're projecting it out, your contractual expense will be like $1.5 million. Your actual cost will be $454,199. All assumed. We'll have to see what the final requests say. So initial requests is where we get that number from, and that was, they came in on December 13th, and then Mike does his magic and builds all of these budgets so that January 23rd, draft rates can be transmitted to the districts. February, March, Mike, Roseanne, and I do our service visits, so we talk about the budget stuff, but we also say, what else do you need to talk about? Is there anything else there that we need to know or that you would like us to know? March 20th, we mailed the final budget documents to the districts. And then April 1st, we have our annual meeting. Kind of excited, the culinary kids are doing a food truck theme. So they built food trucks to serve you through. And everybody likes a food truck, even if you say you don't, I know you do. April 23rd, City Administrative Budget Vote. We're all in the district chapter board meeting at the same time, either in the morning or at the regular meeting, and they vote on the administrative budget. And then May 13th is when the city board adopts the general fund budget. And I know it's like feeding into a fire hose, but I can take questions, thoughts, desires.
I mean, I'll start. With the reduction of kids that are going to be eligible, could you talk about long-range plans as far as consolidation with maybe on our county BOCES? Just, I mean, here in Central Square we've closed schools because of it. We've been driven to that. So could you talk about your long-range plans as far as what you're going to do going forward?
So my long-range plans as far as program will be totally based on what the district's needs are. So this is an example. So we've had a reduction in the number of kids, but the number of students attending BOCES in the last 8 years has gone up exponentially. And some of that is due to, this is a good example. You guys have a great business program. You would never ship your kids off to take business classes someplace else. But you're one of the only last men standing with a full contingent of business courses. So as we see districts in their atrophy in some areas where they can no longer sort of afford to support those programs, we're seeing an increase in students either attending New Visions or as it's becoming harder and harder to find technology teachers, the utilization of our shop space and the expertise of our folks is literally 100% dependent on what the districts want to do. Now you would think as everything gets smaller, we should get smaller. If you stop subscribing to service, we will get smaller. But if you don't, if we continue along sort of like the idea of sharing certain things makes more sense because it's more cost effective, then I think that we'll continue to sort of be where we are. As far as shutting down BOCES or consolidating with another BOCES is, that's up to state ed. So every time there's a sort of, and the timing is bad because you should be thinking about it not just when there's a vacancy in the district superintendent position, but every time there's a vacancy in a district superintendent position, they do a full-blown study. And they look at viability and they look at whether it makes sense to consolidate or not consolidate of OCs. I'm never afraid of those conversations, primarily because in the last 3.5 years, I've only been the district superintendent for Oswego, a smidgen of that, because I was at Cuba and Onondaga. I'm at OCM right now and have been since July 1. It's a long process to think about the full consolidation, but it's something we're talking about if people thought that that could be a significant cost saver in the future. But program-wise, we will always support the desires of the district, so as long as there are students to be in program in alternate, exceptional ed, and CTE, we'll just keep running those programs. I know it doesn't make it, I don't know if that makes sense.
I don't think you really answered the question.
Ask it again, maybe.
Well, with the reduction of population
Right.
that's happening with the Oswego County area, you showed the graph.
Yep.
What is your long-term plan to address that? Meaning that we have closed schools here because the money, right? Because your budget doesn't go out to the citizens or go. Not just say I'm running for school board again. Every single person who has to sign my petition said one thing to me: why are my taxes keep going up?
Right.
Every, not one or two, every single person asked me that question. So I have you standing before me where your budget doesn't go before the voters. Okay, it comes out of our budget. That's how it goes, right? So you're in this game too. So I think if you're not understanding and looking at the reality of reduction of population, okay, and how are you going to sustain your thing? Like you're asking, oh, it's only 1.9%. Well, if whatever, we don't want to give it to you. Right? Because within the district, if we don't have the money, we got to make the cuts. But you hand us a bill.
Steve,
Right.
clarifying question or point on that, and obviously Chris, you can point this out, but so much of it is going to be determined, like let's take that square, our enrollment may be declining, but what I don't know is our participation rate of students, for instance, we moved from 100 to 150.
Right.
Right, so that's gonna drive this amount.
Understood, but if you're not looking at ahead of the game, right?
Right.
I don't see how it can stay the same going forward. I don't think 10 years from now, it's going to be the same as it was, because you said it several times, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but here's what I'm going to say again, and I've said before, is that with the second highest population within Oswego County of kids. Okay, so to me, it needs to be brought out as far as how it's going to go. If you go back 10 years, it is not the same picture that it is right now in 10 years. And I don't hear people moving into the district. I hear people moving out of the state. So if we're not planning for it, we don't have an understanding of how we're going to go forward to be successful. Because if we're going to ship all our kids to BOE, then that will make us look going forward as far as what we're going to need for infrastructure teachers and all of that. So to me, there's some big decisions coming, money-wise, right? As far as budgets, what it's going to take to do what we do.
You're 100. I don't think any of this is, like, I'm not just saying BOCES. There is not a model in the world. This is widely unpopular, but I tell it all the time. None of this is sustainable, right? So I guess the conversation I would want to engage with you folks is I know you're looking at BOCES like it's a separate entity. I'm looking at it like it's an extension of your program. Like you made budgetary choices to engage with BOCES in certain areas, whether it be a treatment or CTE or it doesn't matter. I've kind of always seen it. It's not a us against them thing. It's more of a this is where our priorities are. But I think as long as the model in the state remains that BOCES generates additional revenue for you and incentivizes your share, which it does. If you look at your BOCES aid coming back to you every year on your state aid loans, the state is saying, we're kind of asking you to share more. And where that makes sense, people do. I will tell you that I think that people try to utilize BOCES services, whether it's instructional support services, whether it's summer school. I see people maxing out using BOCES because they know that next year it's a revenue source coming back in. So if you were to ever, the long-term look is what's BOCES look like in your educational plan in the future, and what if we didn't do certain things? What does that mean for our revenue being generated in state aid the next year in the following year? Like, I think you gotta dig in.
And if I can just jump in, so when I go around all the different groups in the community, budget time, and throughout the year, mostly budget time, and they'll say, you know, Mr. Calbuco, we want you to know at Central Square, we don't want people to think that we're trying to fit square pegs into a circle hole. And what they're saying is not every kid has to go to college, and they get into all the different career paths and whatnot. So since I have taken over as superintendent, we have increased CTE 33% in that budget because we had kids that they knew right from the beginning, my dad's a welder, I want to be a welder, I want to be in a number of the different programs out there. And so the counselors didn't feel comfortable with capping that at just 100. Now, it's not loose that it's 170 kids. We really look at that, we look at attendance, there's a whole bunch of variables. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we have a program that will match what the student really wants to do, as opposed to saying, no, it's going to be this, sorry. And then those kids aren't going anywhere, but they're staying in the community, but they're not being successful when they walk the stage, if they walk the stage. So, like what you said, the more we use City BOCES, the more it's just going to, it's where it's at right now.
Right, and it's so the tax cap is not a bad thing, and I live here, right? I get my tax bill. I know what it is. It's not a bad thing, but that's not the end all be all of our revenues. Like, if you are capped at that artificial 2%, which you know really isn't 2%, it's a formula, blah 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 blah. Well, let's say the 2%, but your budget's going up 6% or 7%. All of the rest of the revenue you're using to balance your budget is coming from state aid. A majority of your funds come from state aid. A portion of that is money coming back to you for sharing at BOCES. I would actually ask that you pull it out and kind of take a peek at it, because it is a significant dollar amount for you to balance your budget moving forward. So while I don't want to get into a big budget breakdown, we do have to remember that if my taxes are capped at 2%, and that's the revenue we're gaining locally, and our budget is going up beyond that, the other place that you're balancing the budget is from your state aid. If state aid is a majority, it's a big chunk of our change, right? Like, I know what the runs are like. In that is BOCES aid, and BOCES aid is state aid, and it was built like that back in 1947 because too many of our communities didn't have the means to run programs that were high cost. So, in long-term planning, we do. Literally none of this is sustainable at the inflationary rates, and they're hard conversations because it involves people that live and work really hard in our communities. It involves retiree health. It involves all of the third rails that are very, very difficult for us to engage in.
Mr. Scott, the only question I had, you pointed it out, the surplus. And I think if I remember the last conversation with Mike was around, it's not about the surplus, because I think anyway, at least for a very elementary level, I understand the reason for it. The question was more around just the amount of it, because like I look at it and point out to me the fallacy in this, but like our 2021 will take, our estimated surplus refund is just shy of 160,000. Right. But our net cost is 454. So that's, I compared to the net cost, so it's almost 33% of our final cost of what we spend on BOCES, right? So it seems high, and I'm just trying to understand, because you're saying it's a 10-year average, that projection.
That projection.
But is there much of a delta in that 10 years? Are we pretty much always getting that percentage back? That's all I'm looking for.
We are really consistent. And I know your net costs compared to that number look look tight.
Right.
I'm looking at your initial request number and where that ends up being, because I'm building budgets based on what you're telling me you think you're going to spend. And we've had the discussion. The reason that there is sort of that refund is because I don't ever want to come to you. And under state law, I have to come to you and balance my budget before the end of the year. So I can imagine coming here and standing before you in April while you're getting ready to do your budget and say, hey, by the way, I have these two programs, they're super high cost, and they didn't even break even, and now you guys owe me $300,000. Like, that's a far worse conversation to have than to say, I'm gonna give you back $150,000.
And I appreciate that, I respect it. And trust me, that at the end of this, even if you dropped it by 80%, that's a 1 year change, right? I mean, then it's that 20% every year. But I don't have access, at least I don't think I do, to the data to say, do you know, like, are these refunds, is that pretty much the standard across the state, or are we doing it higher or lower than others? I just don't know what the benchmark is.
We're mid-range, we're right in the middle. We're not too tight, and we're certainly not, like, we're not helping you with cash flow for overestimating costs so that I can give it to you later. There are regions that's a practice, so that they don't have any cash flow issues because they get a check back in October, and they know that will get them through the following year. So once you go down that path, that's really hard to wean your budget off of really large influxes of cash in the fall when you know you need it for cash flow. So we're right in the middle. Like the amount, our book of business usually it fluctuates at about 162 or 172 to 175, depending on the year, depending on what we have going on. So for our book of business to be that high, to refund $3 million, I'm comfortable with it. You know, whether it's $3 million or maybe tips out at $4 million, and that's also, again, that's based on a good healthcare year. I like being it's not too comfortable, but I know that I'm not going to ever have to come to you in the spring and say, hey, I need more money. That would be catastrophic. So.
All right, I appreciate that. And then this is going to sound like a loaded question, but I promise it's not. Your salary benefits, are they in the admin budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So my question is not loaded because I'm asking about the state. So
yeah.
You're covering for another BOCES right now.
Yes.
Does that BOCES reimburse our county districts for that? I mean, because the reality is you only have limited hours, right?
No.
So that should be a lobbying point to me. I mean, that's fairness and equity, right?
So
we're funding.
They're paying my mileage when I drive down there, and when I go to Albany, my costs for doing business in Albany, they're sharing the cost of that. Now my entire salary isn't in there, so I get it used to be a third. It's about I get a little over a quarter of my salary direct from New York State, and that's why they have the ability to cap both my benefits and my salary because I get that little piece. You sound like my board members, which I'm glad because they say the same thing. It's just the way the system was built, and it's one of those things where, for lack of a better term, I have to suck it up. But you're right, it is sort of inherently fair that the 9 components are footing the majority of the bill for my time. When it gets to be extended periods of time, like it has been in my career, I'm with you on this one.
But OCM wins on those dollars, though, because they're not paying Joe Blow, correct?
100%. Yeah. 100%.
Okay.
And do you remember the last time that a different district superintendent covered for our 9 component districts?
It was 9 years ago. It was Jay Boak. He came down from Jeff Lewis BOCES, and he was here 1 year. 1 year seems to be this wicked pattern. And I mean wicked in the bad way. It just seems like we get locked into the expectation that we will do the work for a year.
Yeah, I only have 2 comments, Chris. Thank you for coming, first of all. Obviously, you mentioned it a couple times, it's not sustainable. So that's what worries me as a, not only board member, but as a taxpayer. And then I hear the model since 1946, and I really wonder what has changed in those times in the model. That's a little frightening for my mind. I'm not asking you to do anything, it's more of just a comment. But I look at them like the health benefits, it's almost 50% of the budget, give or take 47%.
Yeah.
And those are just scary, scary numbers as I sit here, and I say it every year, but again, I know you don't have an answer to it, but I don't sit here with confidence, not in you, I do have confidence in you, but above down in Albany, when our leader of the state, and it wasn't a joke, but when he blames people leaving the state due to the weather, that's frightening to me, because that's not it. You know, so it's really worrisome, again, as a taxpayer and a board member.
I think non-sustainability isn't just a BOCES issue. I hope I was clear on that.
Absolutely.
It's a holistic, systematic issue.
Absolutely, in the state.
In the state.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, it is.
I agree.
So Chris, before we let you out, I was going to mention this during our open board forum, but I would just like to mention it while you're here. I was talking to our city board rep, Mrs. Haskins, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I think. And I just mentioned the idea, and I'd be interested, you can mull it over and think about it, but I'm mentioning it to our board as well. Our board has been, I think reticent would be the right word as far as doing a board retreat. But when I was talking to Mrs. Haskins, I mentioned the idea of, I think it would be tremendous value to looking at down the road and maybe in the August timeframe of doing a county-wide board retreat where we can, one, give city the opportunity to get a really good message out to all of the component districts, but also just, we don't do a lot of sharing across lines, right? I mean, we have obviously a Oswego County School Board Association, but I think there's benefit. The retreat allows us to have some conversation, discussion with other board members and maybe look at things a different way across district lines. So I don't need a response tonight, it's just a food for thought thing, but I also don't know if it's ever been done anywhere else.
So, like, obviously I'm very supportive of boards and whatever they want to do. It's a board issue, but I've heard it 4 times, right? I've heard it 4 times because I think what happens is when board members do get together with board members that aren't from their communities and they engage in conversation, they walk away feeling, I need to do that more often. Or they gain some small insight from the conversation about either the way someone does something. Sometimes you gain insight and you say, geez, I'm glad we don't do it that way. I'm in full support of that, but I've heard it 2 or 3 times in the last 3 weeks, and I think it's a good idea.
Good, thanks.
All right. And I wanted to say thank you for not bringing up COVID-19 with me today, because it has consumed all of our lives, including Tom's. There will be more. I will just take this as a public service address. Just understand that this is such a fluid situation, that anything that I may be giving to Tom and the administration today could be different by 9 a.m. tomorrow. So, we're just all kind of hanging on, and I appreciate all the support. I get the email, text, I get all the information because of being a parent and a resident, and it's been very useful to feel like, even though there's not a lot to know, feeling like I was a little bit in the know has been useful. So I wanted to say thanks to Tom.
Very much appreciate you coming and
Thank you.
handling all our questions. Thanks for.
All right.
Wait.
Oh.
Down here, the census. What can you tell us about the census?
So I did send some stuff out to the supers. We're gonna go over it again. We have a chiefs meeting coming up next week. Basically, it's about the importance of every person has to be counted. Like, I'm a firm believer in this because, and not just in our community, right? Across the county and across the region. And I don't care like where you came from. Every person counts. So if you're here as a migrant, you count. And the reason all of these people must be counted is because we lost seats the last time we had a census in New York. We are going to lose more seats in New York if we don't make sure that all of our folks are counted. And the reason that I say all of them, I run a pretty big migrant program, right? Those kids who are in our schools, we're paying for those services in our community. We have to make sure they're counted. The other thing is our folks that are poor and living in geographic isolation, like down our side roads, we have to make sure they're counted. And there's lots of options for us to do that, but between what schools are willing to do and how we can engage with our public libraries, and the other piece is that they will be hiring door-to-door census takers, and they want people from our communities. They don't want people not from our communities knocking on doors in our communities, and so they will be going through the hiring process. So I'm hopeful that, after our next meeting, and I know Tom did get some stuff, but we'll talk about it, and then we'll get the stuff out, because I think our kids returning from college, some of our kids that are graduating, being a census taker, $15 an hour, it's not a full-time job, but you can if you want to. We have to find people in our communities that are willing to go out there and have these people count.
Yeah, that's on our agenda Wednesday, this Wednesday.
Yes. I say like Chiefs meeting next week, it's.
Count it only once, however.
Count it only once, no matter what.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Chris.
All right, take care.
All right, with that, we will move into item G, which are our reports. We're going to have a mini update. I know Ms. Vogel put there's nothing else on the census at this point, but it's on there to remind us. Fisher, anything to report? Nothing there. Open it up to the board. Our student board rep, I think, has an introduction.
Yes, I do. I would like to introduce Jacob Thompson, our new Student Board of Education representative for next year. Jacob, if you want to come up and say a few words or say hi.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacob Thompson. I'll be the new student representative for next year. I'm looking forward to working with you all, students and staff, to improve the district. Thank you.
Great. And as I pointed out to him, one of our longer meetings, so he chose a great night to come and sit down with us.
Yes, and then one more thing. Mrs. Enright and Mrs. O'Meara met with about 16 students to talk about the mentorship program. They said that meeting went very well, and tonight they also met with parents of the 16 students, and we had an attendance of, it looks like a little less than 0. So that might sound like a bad thing, but in reality that's exactly what we wanted. If we had those parents coming to support their child, that's not the kid that we really wanted. So we're in the steps for the right process. It's not really a good thing for Mrs. Enright, because now she has to find a way to get information to those parents, but for me it's a really good thing. So that concludes my report.
Great, thank you. Open it up to the board. Any topics or items to bring up? All right, I will just jump on the recognizing Mrs. Enright bandwagon. The board got an email forwarded from Mr. Colufo today just recognizing her. So I think it's important to publicly recognize that, when staff in the building calls you out for great leadership and going above and beyond, it's a really great sign for all of us. So thanks for all you do every day. All right, Mrs. Haskins, would you like to come to the podium? And thanks to Mrs. Haskins, by the way. She was able, and I know I mentioned this in the previous meeting, but attended the lobbying day in Albany and very much appreciated. I know you were representing City BOCES, but it's basically from here, so.
So I'll open it up with that. For those of you that don't know, Pearl was able to scan those documents in for you guys yet? Okay. So I was able to snag an extra folder for you guys. They dropped it off to Amy last week, and not to go over everything in its entirety, but all of the talking points, everything that we did lobby for. There were 7 of us in total from Oswego County. And I'm gonna piggyback off of a lot of the conversation that just took place with Chris. The most beneficial part is the 5 hours in between your meetings on Monday, and you're sitting with the board members from Oswego that you never met, and Fulton that you never met, and Hannibal, and just the camaraderie and the conversation that takes place, and the common themes and different things that everybody's experiencing. Chris, I'm surprised he didn't say anything, but I did talk to him. He's opening up city space to us if we are interested in collaborating and organizing this countywide board retreat. His only recommendation was that we use the Oswego County School Board Association, possibly maybe to facilitate this. Maybe they got the resources, maybe some experience and got them for it. I'll put a plug in at this time too and say, I've heard Ms. Wood mention a retreat, even amongst yourselves. I did one this year, and it was extremely beneficial to me. I don't know what you guys have done in the past. We didn't have anyone come in and really go over anything with us or any skills, but it was just goal setting with the board, with the superintendents, with the administration, and just to be able to sit down and spend that day together. I watched a majority of you when we go to the annual convention this year, and it's just to see you come together and have those conversations away from this table and without the eyes and the camera, just to reconnect. And I'm just going to put that plug in here and say that it was amazing. I enjoyed every second of our own retreat, and look forward to working with you guys maybe on doing something online, because I think you'd have a lot of interest. I really do. So I'll go back to the board members next week and ask them to bring it back and talk to Don at the same time and see if maybe Oswego County School Board Association might be interested in kind of working something. And then Andy, again, has all the talking points. So I've got a couple of things, again, to piggyback off of. When he talked about up here tonight, looking at that BOCES report, I have gone through that with a fine-tooth comb over the last couple of months, just listening to conversations that take place in here. Maureen's not here tonight, but Tom is aware that there was only one that I know of, but there was one error on there. But had we not had that conversation here, had we not gone through that, it's quite possible maybe that wouldn't be corrected. But I want to caution you when you do go through them. One of the notes that I did have on here was, it was reference to poster number 402. You want to be careful when you go through those to make sure that you're aligning them to the appropriate program at BOCES. So one of the numbers that was stated to you guys as being what aid you got back on the CARE program was 40% last time it was here, and that's where we found the error. But that's actually, poster 402 is actually for the Project Explorer program. So if you go down a couple of lines to the 408 line, which is actually the CARE program, you'll see that it's actually 63% last year was what you got back on aid. Again, nothing that I'm doing up here is ever to say that I'm citing on one or the other with what you're doing forward. It's just to say there is a correction. Just make sure that you line those up with what BOCES actually has that program for, because all they say on the BOCES aid report is alternative ed secondary, and there's like 4 of them. So it's easy to grab the first one, but it's not entirely accurate when you're trying to line it up to one particular program. The refunds. I can't say anything more than the one thing that I have found that, and I'm not saying even in defense of, but the one thing that I have found, I have done a lot of research. I go through BOCES across the state, and I look at different presentations that they give to their promoted districts to see do they do something better than us, is there something I'm missing? Because I want to make sure I hear Steve louder than probably anybody else, and I appreciate it. But I do go through myself and I try to identify areas of concern for everybody else. This is statewide. There is absolutely make no mistake, this is statewide. And I've also looked to verify, because I asked the question before and Roseanne Bain actually answered, and this is the first time Chris I've heard say it, but we are right in the middle. There's no mistake in that either. The one thing that I will say is, you guys have something that we don't, is pretty much a common theme, and it can go back and forth all day long. So you guys can carry a common balance, we can't. That's part of the reason that I have found in every explanation by every other BOCES organization that has anything posted, that's the biggest reason why you get such a refund. The other thing that I am curious about myself, just because I heard Maureen Ladd say, it was over the summer, that there might be an overestimation. You always want to make sure, and I want to say it was July, I believe it was the first time I had seen Dr. Collins actually at a board meeting, but not as it had been, she was in the audience, to give you a perspective on time frame. But she had made comment that there's an overestimation when it comes to student population. If we think there's going to be 5 going into an exceptional ed program, we might say 6. I don't know if it would be risky of the district. I'm not advising it, I'm just saying it's something maybe to look at. If you would like to see that go down, could we underestimate? And it's just a thought. I'm not saying you should, could, I'm not saying you've seen other districts that have done it. But rather than overestimate or hit the nail on the head, maybe if you don't want to budget for the refund, maybe underestimate. And that could be one way that 1.2 million is a lot of money. I hear you 110%. So that is just a couple of things that I've done research on, and again, I don't know if it would help in any way to do it that way, but it's just a thought. I talked to Tom about this, I talked to Andy about this. You look at BOCES, you look at all the programs we have, you look at all the space that we use, and you look at all the principles we have, or excuse me, that we have. So I go back with the very hard question to ask. How can we justify having all of these principles? And for those of you that did a tour this year, or if you went on your own and even investigated the program that we have in the space we have. I walked into one building last year, having heard this comment about the principals before. I walked into a building last year and thought, there were 3 classrooms, exceptional ed, so you're talking 8 per teacher in each classroom, 3 classrooms, and there's 1 principal. So I asked the question, how can we reasonably afford, without the districts coming back and saying, you just hire people at random, how can you have all these principals? Then I said, it's a fabulous question, and I just might have the answer for you. And I'm going to tell you, talk to your superintendent and see what his position is on this after I'm done, because he may have a very valid reason. I'm only talking to one side. We offer in writing when we go in to lease a space. So for instance, when they come to lease Central Square basement, or what do you guys call it now? The garden. When they come in to lease that space, they give you 2 options. One is lease only, one is lease with administrator. It's what I've been told, please verify. I do not have access to those numbers, I didn't dive into it yet. What the difference would be, if you were to accept the lease only option, which is most common, we have to hire a principal for that space. Whereas, if you were to accept the lease with administrator option on there, we would not have to hire for that principal that has that $30,000 salary cap. If it's an alt ed or a CTE program, keep in mind with exceptional ed, there is no aid. You would then be able to pay that in as a component district. Every component district would be able to pay that in as lease and get your, for Central Square, 76% aid. So there's 2 options for that. One of them being we would not actually have to hire that principal, and if it is an exceptional education program, there is no aid on that at all, because that all runs through program. I don't know if I'm explaining that. If you need me to go back over it again.
I know it makes sense to me, and I just want to verify, because I believe it was also, the way it was explained to you, there's a financial incentive in addition. It basically is lucrative and incentivizing the component district to utilize existing principals or admin staff. But again, it goes without saying, that can't always be done, right? I mean, you don't always have any excess time or ability to manage those people, but.
I think the biggest thing too is, we're not talking, these are high needs, right? These are not your simplest classrooms. If you've got 1 or 2, I would question maybe why that district. And keep in mind too, this has been said as well, only that school district is getting the benefit of that additional lease incentive, right? I hear that, I hear it 100%, but I also, if you sit down and you do the math on it, you've got entire cost on the backs of the districts with no aid whatsoever, other than what you collect with foundation aid, or high cost aid even can come in there to some degree. Or you've got the lease going out that's aidable 100%. So, or I say 100%, 76% is for Central Square. So playing off of it, but it's a big burden on the district. I don't know if in Central Square if we could have easily at all accommodated that, and I don't know what the price was on it. I'm not saying that I'm not saying it's appropriate to go this way, but I am saying that is the option that is given.
But there's a 3rd option, and they can consolidate programs that they currently have, where one of their principals would oversee 3 of the programs in a building.
In one building?
Yeah. So there is a 3rd option.
Okay.
That makes sense to me. That's where I was at.
So originally, when CSI was on the table, there was the opportunity to have multiple programs in there. Would have had 1 principal. So I get that we look at what is the, I don't want to say Rolls Royce, because I'm not, the frustration that every component district, I'll speak for myself. I would love to be able to put out a program that says, no, it's this way because it is the best that we can do. But again, we have to pass a budget for our voters, and we have to be responsible to look at all the pieces. So I only bring up that third option because if there are, within a building, if there's space, and we're getting more space in buildings, if we could have 2 city programs in there where we only had one where they were in different locations, now you just accessed an entire administrative position.
I love it, and I'll bring it back. Do you happen to know, is there space existing outside, I'm gonna leave CSI off the table. That was before my time, I don't know where we're at with it now. Don't really want to go back over that. Is there space elsewhere in the county where you are sure they can consolidate now? Because I would be willing to ask that question.
Well, again, I have a meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, with the chiefs. I'd rather wait and talk to them.
Okay.
There were chiefs that still were looking at their districts because we're all experiencing a declining enrollment. So space, unfortunately, is something that we're all going to continue to grow and have. So I think as we move forward, that third option is something to look at to be able to say, we can fit multiple programs within this one building and have one city BOCES principal there.
Okay.
It's just a third option.
And I will absolutely go back and I will look at that. I have no problem doing that. Any chance I get to look into something that has been raised here, I will absolutely do it. I do know there are some, based on what I've heard so far, some of the programs that we are shutting down, other districts are having to find space. So I don't know how that's all going to shake out for us either. So I will definitely ask that question. But I think it's worth, I don't know where the chiefs stand on this. But is it worth having that conversation again and opening that back up again? I'm just throwing out there what I've been told. So I don't know, somebody has asked me here what the total savings would have been over a certain period of time. I did not dive in that deep to it. If we need me to or want me to, I certainly can. I don't know historically how long they keep those documents of those offers for lease or lease with administration. I don't have those.
Well, there's another one. I don't know if Roseanne shared yet, but City BOCES had just gotten a grant for a recovery high school. They would cap it at 30 students, but it would actually be in I believe it's in, I want to say it's in Mexico, that it's a refurbished building. It's not a current school building. So I'm assuming that would have a principal as well. So that would be another example of a principal being created in that position where there's, I believe, $1 million in the grant that would be able to be sustained for 3 years. So you may want to look into that as well.
Okay. Christy, do I see your name on the bottom?
Just to be clear, I know we've talked about this issue before, when there's the lease or the B option that includes the administration, does the administrator get a stipend from BOCES? Does BOCES cover a portion of that administrator's salaries? How does that work?
So it's my understanding that they offer to lease with the additional incentive, whatever that may be. Let's say, and I'm not saying this is it. It's 100,000 with, it's 110, or without, it's 110,000 with. That extra $10,000 would be aidable to all of the districts, but it would be at the discretion of the district, is the best of my understanding, as to whether or not they would give that administrator. That I don't know, but I believe Tom may be able to answer that. That's at the discretion of the district, correct?
Yeah, there wasn't that much of a difference when you look at what they pay per classroom, but then you get union issues and whatnot. So what we had in I know people can look at it and go, well, we have 3 administrators in the middle school with 880 students, 890 roughly students. But the majority of time, that one of them would have always been down in the lower level. So then when you look at that, that's also has to be in agreement with Zanies and the admin, unit to be able to, because it's a change to their job. So there are a lot of variables. The difference between the 2 rates that we would be getting wasn't enough of the first time for us to look at that and say, okay, that's worthwhile. It just, the number wasn't. And again, I don't want the number to be too big because we have one of the biggest Arwadas. We'd be paying it anyway. So if one of the districts...
Not as much, in all reality, not as much as what you're paying now.
Correct.
Because it would run through, because there's no salary cap on it. I think that's the point you're driving home. There's no salary cap on it. It's not subject to that $30,000 cap. It would we're going through the capital budget. So therefore, for Central Square, it would be 76%. And I think that's where they're going with it. And I'm not defending it, I'm just trying my best to explain it the way it's been explained to me so that
Sure.
I don't want anybody to think that, I understand consolidating and I'll address that. I absolutely will ask that question. But it's not just at random, it's not just because they lease the space that they find available, that is available to them, and they have to cover it. They have to. I'm not saying in every instance, I'm not saying for the middle school that it would have been feasible for some or that the price point was high enough. Is that negotiable though? That is an answer I don't have. Would it make more sense for us to hire another administrator? Would we save enough money? I haven't sat down and done that. I'm just giving you the information. I've heard this principles at random, right? So I investigated it. And I'm not telling you I have all the answers to what would be the most beneficial financially, but there are options that maybe could float around. One of them being coming back to us and saying, consolidate your space. I hear you 110% there. I do. And I don't know what happens now. This is just another note I just jotted down, but with us pulling back, with class sizes decreasing, can we take that space remotely? And I don't know, but I'm writing it down as it comes to me.
With us pulling back, they didn't have any space because of the waiting list. They filled it right in. So that when you're referring, you say pull back the handful of programs that we're bringing back to Central Square, there were already waiting lists in the county for those programs, so that it's not going to create any issue. There's not a blip on the radar at all regarding that. I mean, we still have some counties, right, we still have districts right now that pay to send their kid to, let's say, a 612 or an 811 in our county to a school instead of the city, and they pay whatever that rate would be because of the waiting list.
That's not my understanding. I don't believe we have middle school programming for anybody next year. I know there's other districts looking for.
Yeah, I'm just talking about programs in general, like an 811, because Hannibal pays Fulton. They send a kid over there as opposed to sending it to BOCES because there's a waiting list there. What the chiefs are looking at right now is to find where are they going to put that middle school space. Correct, because it's not going to be housed there. I would be shocked if there wasn't space somewhere for that to end up. But that's a conversation, again, that happens with the chief.
Absolutely. No, yes, absolutely. Anything else on that particular topic? Elections are coming up. Mexico, Sandy Creek, and Oswego are the spots that are going to be filled. To the best of my knowledge, everybody remains the same as of right now. There was a possibility that maybe one person from Oswego, one of the first being interested. I have not heard anything. I did miss my first board meeting last month, so I will find out next week.
So I just want to point out, because you and I talked about this, and just so the board's aware, in case any one of us can nominate someone for another district, as long as they are a resident of that component district. So if you know someone that would make a great candidate, whatever, you have that ability, and I don't know that I was aware of that before, certainly wasn't top of mind. So if you know someone out from Mexico, Sandy Creek, or Oswego, feel free to nominate.
I have one last thing to bring up. I went over it with Kristen and Wright, but I know I had talked to Tom about this, so I will say it here. There are programs available at the city for high school students. For instance, pull-out English. When you attend a CTE program, a big bulk of your grade is project-based. So if you're welding, if you're cosmetology, a big portion of your grade is actually going to be a result of a project or classwork that you are doing that actually requires you to be in the class for the length of the 2.5 hours that you are there. They do offer classes like English where they can pull you out and you can complete your course of study for that year and get a full English credit. Using English is just simply unacceptable. Unless a student has fell behind in high school. Maybe didn't pass 11th grade English here at Central Paul B. Moore, and they need to double up their 12th grade year. Unless that is the case, the recommendation that has been given to me is that students do not, and I did go over this with Kristen last week, students do not get placed into these classes unless that is the case, because what's happening is they're getting pulled out of their CTE course, and it's not really that justifiable for them to miss that much time. So much of it is hands-on, project-based, almost work-based learning. It was not recommended that they be pulled out. I'm not sure where the wires need to cross. I know there's a few kids that are in BOCES English this year that fell behind a little bit at the beginning of the year. It was not necessary. So I would say going forward, when you're making those decisions, it might be best to avoid that route as much as possible, unless it's necessary. And outside of that, April 1st, Chris already said April 1st is our annual meeting. And then, if there's anything else for me.
Nope. Thank you, appreciate it, and I'll remind everyone, the city budget vote is April 23rd. That is a Thursday night, so that's our meeting that week. I just want to make sure everyone looks at the calendar, because we're not getting the Thursday night meeting, so. And I am almost certainly out of town, so you'll be having this robot head on the computer screen, I think, that night. But if anyone else knows of Thompson, please make sure to let me know, because it's obviously critical that we have a forum able to do that, so. All right, with that, we'll turn over to Ms. Cole, who will the superintendent's report.
Congratulations to the following varsity teams for achieving the New York State Scholar Athlete Team Award. Boys basketball, girls basketball, boys indoor track and field, girls indoor track and field, rifle, and girls bowling. WGI Drumline Regional. Congratulations for an excellent performance in the regionals at Trumbull, Connecticut. They placed 6 out of 13 drum lines at regionals in the prelims and finished tied for 8 out of 11th place, out of 11 total drum lines in the final competition. Congratulations. WGI again, regional, continue to see pictures. WGI, again, more pictures. Winter Guard, congratulations to all the members of the Central Square ERA Guard, Central Square Junior Varsity Guard, and Varsity Guard for their excellent performances at the home show February 29th. Winter Guard, the ERA and Guard, and the Junior Varsity Guards placed second in their classes at the Varsity Guard, and the Varsity Guard placed first, scoring the highest of all 27 guards competing on February 29th. Good news. From Brewerton Elementary, Ready to Code Grant Award. We are thrilled to receive this award from the Public Policy and Advocacy Office of the American Library Association with sponsorship from Google. Receipt of this grant funding requires the use of applied digital skills, curriculum, and resources provided by Google. The grant has been received an agreement for doing applied digital skills lessons with 4th and 5th grade in spring that use coding, evaluating sources, creating an interactive guide about the research location. This is a $700 grant, and in the fall, the library received a $300 grant for participating in Google's CS First Hour of Code activities. Our ride for Reading Month featured weekly individuals and class prizes, a library night, 2 hilarious performances by Paige Turner adventurers, and great prizes at the end of the month filled with books and donated gift cards and coupons from the community. We had an average of 59% participation for the whole month and a high of 63% participation out of 4 weeks. Again, I just want to touch upon that. So once a month I have a meeting with all of the PTO and the Superintendent Parent Council. Every year I'm just thrilled at the collaboration among the different PTOs and how they can best, enhance the experiences for all students in all of the buildings. Except the high school doesn't have a PTO, but they have at that point the boosters. Saturday's community performance, Winter Guard, Special Effects Guard. Again, the Special Effects Guard, or the Special Needs Guard, if I had to pick a fan favorite, it definitely would have been the Special Effects. The Special Needs group of students, not only was it so touching to see them perform, but to see our students, our Gen Ed students performing with them side by side. I personally went up to, it gets a little choked up to say it, to thank Chance Nickerson when I watched her daughter. What's your daughter's first name, Chancellor? Shelby. Because the special needs student she was working with right beforehand, which you wouldn't have seen, I got actually first time invited to go behind stage, you know, when before they went into the gymnasium, and the students, the special needs students were just so excited, and they were hugging the students, our Gen Ed students, and it was very powerful. So we talk about the attributes. You know, we talk about test scores, we talk about, you know, things that are important, but those moments right there, they really capture what our students are about. And again, they're not born that way. I recognize that comes from parents that you see in the audience right now that instill that with their kids, and our teachers and our coaches and whatnot. So hats off to Special Effects Guard and everybody that works with them. Third grade, color guard, fourth and fifth grade, color guard, ERA guard, JV guard, varsity guard was fantastic. Another packed performance. You see more pictures of them performing.
I just want to call out also the staff that are working with that Special Effects Guard. It's all donated time. There's no additional pay. So really kudos to them for doing that. It's nothing that they would have to do it otherwise.
A lot of pictures. High school drumline, Hilton, New York. We'll get into that. That's going on. Good news, music department, congratulations to Claire Ames and Joey Mano, who performed this past weekend in the New York State Band Directors Association Senior High School Honors Band. Claire and Joey earned a seat in the State Honors Band based on their performance at the NYSMA Solo Festival. I also want to give a shout out, and I tweeted it out. It was Shelby Pappas and Matthew Stevens were part of student leadership and I believe student activities. Might be getting that acronym wrong, but it's pretty impressive that it was on a Saturday, a beautiful day, where I tweeted out, you know, most students are home doing what they're doing, rightfully so, but they took the opportunity to go and represent their school. I thought that was fantastic. I do want to give a quick update on coronavirus. So Thursday, there's a region-wide meeting with all of the superintendents, and we're going to get some more directive. Wednesday, there is a Oswego County Chiefs meeting, and we're going to kind of dive into it as well. Things that are out there right now, and it's on the website. Anybody can click on the State Education Department website or CDC, and you'll see we have not canceled any domestic trips. I haven't had an international one to have to cancel. We are keeping a close eye, as Chris said, it's very fluid, things are changing all the time. We do have a March 27 trip for drama clubs in New York City. We are continuing to look at developments. But as of right now, we're looking at what State Ed Department says, Health Department and CDC, and they're saying the only travel bans were to Iran, you know, Italy, China, and international travel. We have not canceled any trips. With that being said, I'm a part of a lot of different listservs, and I know right now the big question is going to be, so at 6:10 today, Cuomo put something out, and actually we got something simultaneously from State Ed Department that basically talked about what would you do if, or what you're supposed to do now if you have a case in our district, whether it's a staff member or whether it's a student. So then again, this meeting was about to start, so I shared that with my admin team. I'm going to get something out to our staff, but really a lot of it, more answers are going to be answered, questions are going to be answered this week when we meet with all the superintendents. But some districts right now have already put out the possibility of shutting down for 14 days. So what would that look like to the district? What does that look like? Aid back from the state? What does it look like having to make up that 180-day threshold? There are so many questions that need to be answered. We're not getting, anxious about this. We're not jumping the gun on this. We want to be able to think rationally, and the information that we want to put out, we want parents to be able to be comfortable that it's not just Central Square, it's out in the county and across the state. So right now, if you watch the news tonight, you'll see that downstate, there are some districts that are shutting down for that quarantine 14 days. We are not there, but we will be putting out kind of what ifs in different scenarios. So people will be able to have a little bit more information. And as more information comes out, we'll be sharing.
Yeah, Tom, I'm sure you guys would likely discuss this anyway, but we're so interconnected. So if the directive is if we have a student, or let's say a different district has a student, they shut down for the whatever 24-hour period, but 15% of our students go to BOCES. So if BOCES has a student, do we all shut down?
Yep.
Those are all questions.
Those are all questions going to be discussed with the energy. Thank you.
Mr. Bovuba. All right, move into items for discussion and action. Make a motion to accept item H1, approval of the second reading of proposed district policies. Motion by Ms. Fishman, second. Mrs. Wood. So as a reminder, assuming we approve these then become our newly adopted policies effective immediately. So any discussion? All those in favor of H1? Thank you. I'll make a motion to accept item H2, approval of the capital outlay project seeker. Can I get a second? Second by Mr. McCarthy. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Making a motion for item H3, approval of the resolution to issue a change order to general contract GC2.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. McCarthy, second by Mrs. Nickerson. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion to accept item H4, approval of the resolution to issue a change order to general contract GC2.
Make the
Different
motion.
change order. Motion by Mr. McCarthy. Second by Ms. Wood. Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, and then I will make a motion that the Central Square School District Board of Education hereby move into executive session for purposes to discuss the employment histories and matters leading to the appointment, specifically tenure, of 14 particular people. There will be no action to follow tonight. We review the files tonight, and then at our next meeting we will vote. Can I get a second on that? Mrs. Fishman with a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. As I said, no action, so we will close the meeting from the boardroom, so have a good night.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being so patient.
I'm sorry.